Howdy mates, good afternoon, how are we all doing? Here's my first video for Sunday, June 11th, 2023. I'm revisiting a state park that I haven't been to in a few months. And to be quite honest, this state park actually holds a very special place in my heart, as I've mentioned before in the past. We are at the Highlands Hammock State Park, based near the town of Sebring, Florida. So we're a bit closer to central Florida, as it were. But the park holds a special place because I used to have some relatives that lived in Sebring for the longest time when I was a younger lad. And with my relatives, we would frequently visit this park. So essentially, when I was just a little guy, Highlands Hammock was one of the very first state parks that I ever visited in the state. Anyway, the point of why I am wanting to make this video is because of this particular plant right up here. I know many of you have seen these before. I'm sure you can all absolutely guess what the name of it is. Firebush. Yes, you would have guessed correctly. Firebush is a common shrub found in Florida, and it's one of the most sought after plants when it comes to landscaping. However, despite the good intention of incorporating native plants, you have to be careful. Because here's one thing. Firebush, in general, has up to, mosquitoes, has up to 4 different varieties. One of which is native, whereas the other 3 varieties are a non-native source. So that being said, fortunately, what we're looking at right now, this is a native variety, which is also known as Hamelia patens variety patens. Whereas a couple of other ones, on the other hand, it goes by the variety name of glabra or compacta. And I know there's a 4th one. I think it's a hybrid between the glabra and the compacta, too, for another. So that's another thing about Firebush that can be tricky. It does have a tendency to hybridize with other species, which can make it a little trickier. But the reason that I know that this is a native variety is a couple of different ways. The true native Firebush, the flowers that you're seeing here, they tend to have more of a reddish-orange appearance. And for another, the leaves are a bit larger as compared to other varieties. And these tend to have a bit of a finer texture. I mean, it still has hairs on them, but it's a bit smoother still to the touch. Whereas the other varieties, the hairs are a lot more, what you would say, bristly. And the non-native varieties, some of them come from parts of the Caribbean or even South Africa, too. So it definitely is a global plant. But the native variety, of course, comes from North America. So that being said, the non-native varieties, if you need help distinguishing in color, they tend to have a bit more of a yellow-ish orange. So the good news is we don't really see that in this case. And really another good way to also help tell some differences, especially if you're here at the right time, the native varieties will tend to be a bit more pollinated more frequently by different varieties of creatures, whether it be butterflies, moths, hummingbirds, whereas some of the non-native varieties, not so much. It's quite poetic how our pollinators know which plants are actually native versus what isn't. That's just, and they just know that instinctively, innately. But anyway, that, my friends, is a little piece on the firebush. Considering that we are in a state park, that's a good sign to see that we are looking at a native variety. The Highlands hammock is, of course, known for their hammocks, which is characterized by having large amounts of shade coming from the live oaks, as well as even our cabbage palms, too, for another. And usually hammocks, in general, tend to have a little bit of a higher elevation because a cabbage palm, for instance, can't really survive for too long if it is inundated with water. So it needs to have a little bit of an elevation, even if it's just a few inches above a swamp. Those inches, especially in Florida, make a huge difference in terms of what plant variety you have, or even the water quality too. So, of course, I would say to all of you, if you haven't been, I would, of course, highly recommend. This is actually one of the oldest state parks in Florida, as it was incorporated, I think it was around World War II period, if I'm not mistaken. And it was mostly built up by the Civilian Conservation Corps. So, all right. Take care, you guys. Have a good one. Peace out.